Hi everybody. For today's reflection, I've been thinking about what we can learn from history, from Christians who have gone through pandemics before us. Someone once wrote that history repeats itself and that it has to because nobody listens. And it would be crazy for us to go through this coronavirus lockdown trying to cope with it without learning the lessons from all those saints who've had to endure pandemics and plagues in the past. In AD 165, a plague broke out in the Roman Empire, and over the next 15 years, historians think it killed a quarter of the Roman population, including the emperor Marcus Aurelius. And Roman cities were tightly packed, more so than somewhere like Calcutta today. There was absolutely no sewage system. It was filthy, it was squalid, and disease was just rampant there. So plague spread very quickly. And apparently all the other religions, all the other priests of the state religions, they just fled as soon as what they think was smallpox broke out. But the Christians stayed, and they nursed the sick. They were kind of like a welfare system within the Roman Empire, and their example of sacrificial love was to change Roman culture forever. Before the plagues, all the Greek and Roman philosophers, they considered mercy a weakness. After they saw how the church behaved in the plagues, they considered mercy a virtue. And Bishop Dionysius, who was Bishop of Alexandria at the time of the plague, he wrote to his parishioners and he described to them the behaviour of these Christians who had nursed the sick and given up their lives. And he wrote this: "Most of our brothers and sisters showed unbounded love and loyalty, never sparing themselves and thinking only of one another. Heedless of danger, they took charge of the sick, attending to their every need and ministering to them in Christ. And with them they departed this life, serenely happy, for they were infected by others with the disease, drawing on themselves the sickness of their neighbours and cheerfully accepting their pains. Many, in nursing and curing others, transferred their death to themselves and died in their stead. They were the best of us." It's a marvellous description of a church that really took seriously what it means to love your neighbour in the course of a pandemic. And then fast forward many centuries to 1527, August to be precise, in Wittenberg in Germany. And this time bubonic plague breaks out. And Martin Luther, the father of the Reformation, he was teaching at the Wittenberg University, which immediately relocated and ordered him to do the same, but he refused. And instead, what he did was he stayed around to pastor people. And in his writing, you can see him trying to work out, how does a Christian behave and think in a plague? He was clearly terrified. He talks of himself as being in terror. But he wrote this. He said, "By God's decree, the enemy has sent a poison." In other words, he saw plague as the work of evil, but that somehow God had still allowed. And so he says, "Therefore I shall ask God mercifully to protect us." He was praying that they would be protected. And then he talks about the practical steps he'd take. "Then I shall fumigate and help purify the air, administer medicine and take it. I shall avoid places and persons where my presence is not needed." This is 15th century social distancing. "And in order not to be contaminated and thus perchance infect and pollute others, and so cause their death as a result of my negligence. If God should wish to take me, he will surely find me. I've done what is expected of me, and so I'm not responsible for my death or the death of others. But if my neighbour needs me, however, I shall not avoid place or person, but will go freely." I love that wisdom and reflection as he thinks about, okay, I'm not going to be reckless here, but how can I be faithful? How can I love God and love my neighbour? And how can I avoid not spreading this disease? How can I give my life to God's disposal. And I just think that those examples, just two, are brilliant to reflect on at a time like this. How are we doing with this lockdown? What's it done to our internal thought process? How has our faith been shaped by it? And what can we learn from these saints who have gone before us? If I was to try and summarise the two examples that I've quoted here, I'd be saying things like they viewed the disease as a work of the devil, but somehow allowed by God. They were scared, but they didn't run. They saw benefits in the fear because they understood the fear to refine their deepest motivations and faith. And it brought into stark relief that life on earth was not their priority. They were fixed on faithfully serving God now with an eye for living eternally with him in the future. They were not reckless, but they balanced prudence with faith, and they learnt supremely that their biggest aim, the most important thing, was that they reflected the mercy of God to their neighbours rather than just try to preserve their own survival. I think it's really helpful for me just looking at their example and saying, in the light of their learning from history, how am I doing today? And to help us with that reflection, I attached to this vlog another recommendation of a song just to listen to today. It was sent to me by my friend Jan, who was dying, and the song is called Miracle or Not. And it's a reminder to all of us that at the end of the day, we worship Jesus Christ, not because of what he gives us, but because of who he is. I leave you with Miracle or Not as we reflect on the example of the saints who have gone through pandemics before us. God bless you.